A guest had lost his watch. That was how the whole thing started. An expensive timepiece, a gift from his father, gone missing somewhere between the cocktail hour and the start of dinner. At any other wedding it might have been a minor inconvenience, brushed off with an apology and a promise to search later. But this wasn't any other wedding. This was mine, and when the hotel manager suggested we check the surveillance cameras to retrace his steps, Daniel insisted on going along. "It'll only take a minute," he told me with that familiar, convincing smile. "We should help. It'll be good luck finding it before the night's over." So I went too, still in my dress, my veil tucked back, my heels clicking against the marble floor of the resort's back hallway. The ballroom behind us glowed with laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of music. Guests toasted to love while I followed my groom into a room I never wanted to remember. The monitor flickered to life, black and white footage of corridors and elevators. The manager scrolled back through the feeds. There was our guest, visible at 5:42 p.m., slipping his jacket off at the bar. We laughed softly when we spotted him dancing, gesturing wildly, his wrist bare. "No watch." The manager reassured him. "We'll find it, don't worry," as she cued another camera. And then I saw it. It wasn't the guest. It wasn't the watch. It was Daniel. On screen. Just hours earlier, his tuxedo jacket slung carelessly over his shoulder, his hand brushing against a woman's arm in the hallway. She leaned close. Too close. I recognized her instantly. She wasn't a stranger. She was someone's girlfriend. A friend's girlfriend. And from the way Daniel's head bent toward hers, from the intimacy of the gesture, I knew. My chest tightened. My throat went dry. The sound of the manager's voice blurred into static. "Should we keep looking?" she asked. Daniel coughed, stiff, muttered something about continuing the search, but his face was the giveaway. Guilt flickered there like a light bulb about to burn out. I excused myself, mumbling about needing water. I left the room, but the image followed me down the hallway, through the ballroom doors, back into the music and the lights. My husband, my brand new husband, had betrayed me on the very day we were supposed to begin forever. And I was supposed to stand beside him, smile for photographs, cut the cake, and pretend. I grew up in the Midwest, where weddings aren't just private promises, they're community affairs. My family was there in full force. My mother, a nurse who had worked double shifts to help pay for the dress. My father, a veteran who cried the first time he saw me in white. Cousins, neighbors, even the pastor from our small-town church. For them, this day was a triumph, a symbol of perseverance and hope. Daniel's family was different. Wealthy, well-known in the county, owners of a chain of farm supply stores that had built their reputation on charm and marketing. They wanted a spectacle, a barn-style reception hall dressed up with chandeliers, a lavender field out back for photos, a guest list thick with business partners and distant relatives. We had compromised, blending both worlds, the rustic warmth of my side with the polished elegance of his. I had told myself it was a metaphor for our marriage, two halves stitched together. But standing in that ballroom, clutching my glass of champagne with trembling fingers, I felt the seam split right down the middle. Tasha, my maid of honor, noticed. She touched my elbow. "You okay?" I nodded automatically, though my smile wavered. "Just nerves." But I wasn't nervous. I was furious, and broken, and suddenly terribly awake. I replayed the image in my mind, the hallway, the way she leaned into him, the casual betrayal of it. The timing was crueler than the act itself. On our wedding day, when I was slipping into lace and satin, when my parents were greeting guests, when the pastor rehearsed our vows, he had been elsewhere, choosing someone else. The irony struck me like a slap. We had gone to the cameras searching for a lost watch, a symbol of time, and instead I had found the truth. Time was already up for us. I knew I had a choice. I could cause a scene immediately, shatter the evening with the raw truth, leave guests whispering and family scrambling. Or I could wait. Hold it. Let the knowledge settle until the right moment arrived, the moment when the truth would cut cleanest. I chose to wait. I straightened my shoulders, pasted on a smile, and walked back into the reception. The band was playing a Motown hit. Guests were spinning on the dance floor. Waiters were carrying plates of roasted chicken and vegetables. No one knew that beneath the glow of string lights and chandeliers, a secret had already cracked the foundation. I raised my glass and pretended to toast, but inside, I was rewriting the script of the night. This wasn't just going to be a wedding. This was going to be an ending, and I would be the one to decide how the curtain fell. I went back into the ballroom as if nothing had cracked. The band slid into something familiar, old Motown polish for wedding vows, and cousins from both sides turned the dance floor into a soft whirl of satin and denim. The chandeliers threw honey across the tables. The barn doors at the far end stood open to a lavender dusk. People kept stopping me to say I looked radiant, the particular word folks in the Midwest use when they want goodness for you and don't know what else to add. I thanked them all and smiled so I wouldn't shatter. Daniel found me near the escort card display and kissed my forehead like a man sure of his place in the story. "They're still looking for the watch," he said. "Manager thinks it slid behind the bar rail." His eyes didn't hold mine long. He turned to greet an older couple from his father's store network, posture perfect, voice smooth. Performance was his first language. My mother looped her arm through mine, anchoring me the way she did when I was small and the 4th of July crowd felt too big. "Breathe," she whispered. She didn't ask if I was happy. Mothers read the weather behind your eyes and choose a question the sky can answer. Dad arrived with 2 lemonades, the non-alcoholic kind he prefers, and pretended not to notice my hands. He told a story about a baseball game from the summer I was 9, how I'd struck out twice, and then hit a clean line past second because I kept my stance even. "Even," he said softly now, passing me the cup. I stood straighter. On Daniel's side, the speeches were already being rehearsed in corners. His sister, all gloss and confidence, flipped note cards with a manicure that matched her shoes. His mother adjusted votives by fractions, then rested her hand on my shoulder like she was setting stemware. "Eat something, sweetheart," she said. "It's a long night." My aunt slipped me a buttered roll, and a look that meant I could survive anything if I kept my blood sugar steady. I saw her across the room, and for a second time slowed. Not because of anything overt. No stolen glance, no theatrical exit, just the afterimage of the hallway playing over her face like a superimposed film. She laughed in the right places, applauded at the right times, stood a little closer to the dessert table than conversation required. A tide of cousins moved between us, and, just like that, the spell broke. A wedding can hide anything if you pour enough light over it. I told myself 3 things I could stand on. I would not humiliate my parents by dissolving into a public collapse. I would not hand Daniel a scene to pity later. And I would not carry this into tomorrow. The truth would have its hour tonight, clean, spare mine. The MC called for the first dances. My dress rustled as I crossed the floor and found Dad. He took my hand with the care of a man picking up a small, breakable glass, and the band softened into a song he loved when I was little, clear melody, easy steps. He counted under his breath the way he did when he taught me to parallel park, patient and proud. "Lotta eyes tonight," he murmured. "None of them matter as much as the 2 that look back at you in the mirror." I blinked hard and nodded. We turned twice, then 3 times, the room blurring into a gentle ring of color. For 2 minutes I belonged to the person I had been before time split. When the song ended, the applause was warm and decent. Dad kissed my cheek and went to sit with Mom. She pressed her temple to his shoulder as if they were borrowing steadiness from each other. Daniel stepped in for our dance. Up close, the veneer showed hairline cracks, a sheen at his collar, a flick he couldn't stop at his jaw. He chose volume over silence. "Can you believe the weather?" he said, as if the sky had RSVP'd yes just for us. "Everything's perfect. Everything is exactly what it is," I answered, and he missed the weight of the sentence because he wanted to. We turned beneath the lights, his hand at my back, the ring colder than I remembered. I thought about the corridor, the angle of his shoulders, the unhurried way the camera caught what it caught. Betrayal isn't only in the action, it's in the certainty it requires. He had been certain I would never know. He had been certain the day was already his. Midway through the song, I caught another pair of eyes, his friends. The husband. He stood with 2 groomsmen near the bar, not laughing, just watching the room like a man trying to hear a faint sound under louder ones. He lifted a hand in small greeting. I returned the gesture because civility is a muscle I have trained for years. His wife moved toward their table with 2 cups of coffee she didn't drink. When she placed one in his hand, he smiled like someone who has chosen his script and will not deviate from it until the curtain insists. The toast began. Tasha spoke first because we'd planned it that way. She braided humor with truth the way she always does, telling a story about freshman year ramen and a borrowed winter coat, about a girl who paid off a used car in cash because interest felt like too much surrender. She is sturdy, Tasha said, and she gives away warmth like she owns the company. The room laughed in the good parts and glistened at the rest. When she hugged me, she pressed her cheek to mine a beat longer than pictures require. "You good?" she breathed. "I'm true," I said. "Good will follow." Daniel's best man went next, bright and quick, all anecdotes and sparkle. He loved Daniel with the easy affection of people who've never had to test it. His voice tripped over a joke, recovered, carried on. I watched the husband by the bar as the applause rose. He clapped on tempo and didn't smile. My phone buzzed with the relentless kindness of friends in a group chat named for our college dorm. "You look so happy. Save me a dance. That dessert table is a crime." I typed 3 small red hearts and slid the phone back into my clutch. When you're holding a live wire, you learn to do everything gently. At the sweetheart table, linen pooled like snowfall. I set my glass down and wrote one line on the napkin beneath my plate. "I will not leave myself behind to be loved." The sentence cleared a space inside me big enough to breathe. The kitchen marched courses with the choreography of people who respect both hunger and hope. Roast chicken, green beans glossed in oil and garlic, potatoes roasted the way my aunt makes them for church suppers. People ate and softened. The Midwest likes to talk after its second plate. Daniel kept moving, the way he does when stillness threatens to reveal something. He raised his glass at a distant cousin, bent toward the photographer, made a circle of the room with his charm like a child tracing a boundary with chalk. Charm is a beautiful paint. It will not hold up a house. I didn't study clocks. I refused to turn this into an hourly record. That belonged to hallways and key cards and small lies told like jokes. This was a drama, not a case file. I watched faces. I watched the way Daniel's mother's smile drifted off course when she thought no one saw. I watched the husband's jaw work while his wife told a story to a bridesmaid and tapped her nails, tap, 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 against her glass like an unanswered door. I watched my own hands learn how to be still when stillness was a choice, not a defeat. Somewhere between the second toast and the first slice of cake, the hotel manager appeared at the edge of the dance floor and gave a discreet thumbs up. The watch had been found, of course, slid behind a rail, just a misplaced circle of metal waiting to be retrieved. Time, returning to its owner. I almost laughed at the symmetry. We had gone searching for one lost thing and unearthed another. The universe has a sense of humor that is gentler when you are finally listening. The MC tapped the microphone and announced that, after dessert, the bride would say a few words. Heads turned toward me with the same warm curiosity they had held all night. I nodded, grateful for the beat between now and then. Not to gather evidence. I had already decided to walk the way a woman walks when her feet know the ground, but to gather kindness. I wanted the people I loved to see me unshaken by the fragile architecture of someone else's choices. Daniel sat, finally, and the table absorbed him like a raft. He reached for my hand, squeezed, and whispered, "We're almost to the fun part." I thought of how often we use fun to mean forgetting. I let his hand rest on mine without closing mine over it. He looked away. Somewhere in the back, a cousin started a chant for cake, the band obliged with a flourish. The knife waited beside a tall white confection that had no idea it was about to become a symbol. I lifted my glass, not for a toast but for balance, and watched the room till toward a moment it didn't know was coming. The husband met my eyes again across the crowd. Not a plea, not a dare. Recognition. I did not plan the exact minute. I only knew the truth would enter on its own cue. When you grow up where I did, you learn to end things without breaking the dishes, return the borrowed pan, sweep the porch, say thank you even if you're saying goodbye. I could end a marriage with that same care. Let them eat. Let them dance. Let the kindness go first. And then, when the room was full of music and sugar and the last safe laugh of the night, I would stand and tell the truth in a voice steady enough to build a life on. The cake knife flashed beneath the chandeliers as though it knew more than the rest of us. Daniel guided my hand toward the base of the frosted tower, the crowd chanting softly, cell phones lifted, light bouncing in small squares across the ballroom. I smiled for the camera, but inside, The image of that surveillance screen burned like a watermark on every second. People cheered as we fed each other slivers of sugar. He smeared a touch of frosting on my nose, and the crowd laughed. My lips curved, but I tasted salt, not sweetness. Guests surged toward the dessert table, voices rising in the way they do when sugar and champagne collide. Daniel kissed the top of my head, excused himself to shake hands with his uncle from Minnesota. The photographers circled like a hawk, catching candids no one would hang on a wall. I slipped back to the sweetheart table and checked my phone. One new message. From him. The husband. It was brief, a single sentence, I know. I'm done too. My heart lurched, then steadied. So I wasn't the only one who had found proof. My mind darted back to the woman in the hallway, the way her laugh had tilted just off-key all evening, the faint distance between her and the man who had just texted me. He had seen enough. He had connected the dots without needing a manager, a monitor, a missing watch. Betrayal had its own scent, and we both recognized it. I folded the phone closed in my clutch, the words vibrating inside me like a drumbeat. The decision I had been circling all evening sharpened into clarity. It wasn't about shame anymore, it was about symmetry. If Daniel thought vows were breakable on the very day we spoke them, then I had every right to end them on that same day. If he had chosen betrayal, then I would choose truth, and my truth would not stay hidden in a hallway. The MC tapped the microphone, summoning attention back toward the head table. "We've heard from the best man, from the maid of honor, from the family," he said brightly. "Now, our bride would like to say a few words." Dozens of faces turned toward me, some expectant, some softened by wine, all waiting for another sweet anecdote, another polished promise. I rose, smoothed my gown, and let the silence stretch until the laughter dimmed into quiet. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for believing in love itself." A polite ripple of applause started. I lifted my hand and it stopped. "I need to tell you something I learned tonight." I paused, looking around the room, at my parents, at my cousins, at the neighbors who had driven hours to witness this moment. Then at Daniel, who smiled at me like he still believed I would keep a secret for him. One of our guests lost something valuable today, a watch. To help find it, we checked the cameras. My words sank into the air. And on those cameras, I saw something else. I saw the man I married today with another woman. Not months ago. Not years ago. Today. The silence was sharp, brittle. A fork clattered onto a plate. Someone drew in a breath and held it. Daniel's smile cracked, froze, tried to resurrect itself, and failed. "I will not pretend," I continued. "I will not plaster over lies with cake and champagne. Marriage is a promise. He broke it before the ink on the license was dry. So tonight is not only a wedding. Tonight is an ending, too." I slipped the ring from my finger and laid it gently on the tablecloth, a small circle of metal that no longer belonged to me. "You can stay and celebrate," I told the guests, my voice warmer now. "Eat the cake. Dance to the music. Raise your glasses to love you trust. But for me, this story closes here." I turned, gathered the skirt of my gown, and walked toward the side door. A murmur rose behind me, but no one stopped me. Not my parents. They knew strength when they saw it. Not Daniel's family. They were frozen, statues in the wreckage of their own design. In the corridor, the air felt colder, freer. My phone buzzed again. Another message from him, room 412. Doors open. I hesitated only a heartbeat. Then I lifted my head, squared my shoulders, and stepped into the elevator. This wasn't about romance. It wasn't even about revenge in the cruel sense. It was about standing beside the one person in this building who understood exactly how it felt to be betrayed on the very day you gave everything. When the door slid shut, I exhaled for the first time since the screen in the surveillance room had lit up with the truth. The elevator hummed like a secret as it carried me to the 4th floor. I watched my reflection in the brushed steel, a bride without a bouquet, a woman who had already said her last line and was now walking through the quiet after. The doors parted onto carpet patterned like cornrows, the kind of hotel design meant to be invisible. Room numbers glowed in small brass frames. I followed the even numbers until 412 stood in front of me like a choice. The door was cracked, just as the text said. I knocked anyway. It opened the rest of the way to reveal him, Daniel's closest friend, the man who'd stood beside him at baseball games and bachelor parties, now with his tie loosened and his expression stripped of rehearsal. Up close, he looked the way people look after a hard truth has finally set, older, calmer, past the performances. He stepped aside. I entered, and he closed the door gently, the latch catching with a soft click that sounded more like a comma than a period. "I'm Caleb," he said, as though names could still matter. We'd met a dozen times, but names are handrails when the room tilts. "I'm sorry it had to be tonight." "I'm sorry, too," I said and meant it. Sorry for the parts of a story that had been lovely once. Sorry for the people who had given their Saturdays and their savings to a celebration that didn't survive the day. Sorry for the two of us, standing here because other people made choices and called them accidents. The room was standard issue Midwest resort. A window that looked over the parking lot, a desk with a sturdy chair, a king bed with too many pillows to suggest luxury. A little card by the TV welcomed the Morgan, pen wedding in a looping font. Someone had set 2 water bottles beside it, still sealed, like proof that at least one promise on this floor hadn't been opened. He gestured to the chair. I took the edge of the bed instead, gathering lace and tulle so it wouldn't crumple. He sat on the low bench at the foot, palms on his knees, wedding ring catching the lamplight like a question. "How did you know?" I asked. He exhaled, a sound that had been waiting all night. "I didn't go looking," he said. 2 days ago, Riley left her phone on the kitchen counter with directions to the rehearsal dinner pulled up. A banner rolled, and over the map, nothing explicit, just wrong enough that my stomach learned a new language. I ignored it. I told myself a kind lie. He glanced toward the nightstand, embarrassed by his own politeness. When she went to the spa this morning, another one came. Then she was late to the photos and laughing in a way I couldn't place. I thought I was crazy. Then I watched you on the mic, and I knew I wasn't. I told him about the watch, the hallway, the manager scrolling, the way the screen didn't blink when my entire life did. I left out the timestamps, the angles. He didn't need proof. Proof was the reason we were breathing at the same pace in a quiet room while the band played another song downstairs. "So what now?" he asked softly. "Now I don't carry his secret one step further," I said. "I already put it down." My voice surprised me, steady, almost gentle. "I don't want a blowtorch. I want symmetry. Not to hurt for sport, not to trade one cruelty for another. Just to put the weight back where it belongs." I searched for a word big enough and not mean. To balance the ledger. Caleb nodded like a man who has stacked too many boxes on one side of a truck and is relieved to move a few to the other. "I told Riley I know," he said. "Texted her when you walked out. She hasn't answered. Daniel texted me twice. Come talk to me. I didn't." We sat with that. The air conditioner sighed. Somewhere down the hall, a door latched. I thought of my mother's hands pinning my veil, of my father counting steps during our dance. I thought of Daniel's easy grin the first time we split a plate of fries after a late class, and how I mistook charisma for character because they look like cousins in soft light. "Do you hate her?" I asked. "I don't," he said, and surprised himself. "I hate the choice. I hate the story it tells about us. But hatred isn't a house I want to move into." He rubbed his thumb along his ring. "Do you hate him?" I considered it. Hatred would have been simpler, cleaner, maybe even fun for a minute. "I hate the part of him that thinks love is a stage," I said. "I hate the carelessness. I don't hate the person. I just won't share a life with the person he's decided to be." Caleb's shoulders lowered, as if I had said the sentence he'd been trying to form. "Then we're the same," he said softly. I stood and crossed to the window. The parking lot shone in neat rows of reflected light. The night staff moved carts with the quiet skill of people who know their work matters even when no one claps. In the glass, my reflection looked less like a bride and more like a woman in a white dress who had outgrown a story an hour ago. "I don't want to be cruel," I said, still looking at our ghosted shapes in the pane. "But I don't want to be gentle to the wrong people anymore." He came to stand beside me, leaving the respectable space that kind men leave. "We don't owe them performance," he said. "We owe ourselves peace." There it was, the word that fit. Not revenge like a headline. Not spectacle like a clip meant to travel. Peace. The opposite of pretending. The opposite of carrying someone else's lie. I turned. "Then let's write our ending without them," I said. "Not for an audience. Not for a rumor mill. For the two people in this room who didn't choose this and still have to live with it. He didn't move closer. He didn't make it confusing. He held my gaze the way you hold a door for someone carrying too much. Steady, present, without commentary. If we cross this line, he said quietly, it's ours. No apologies later. No stories that make us smaller than we are. Agreed. Agreed, I said, and felt the last hinge inside me ease. We didn't hurry. We talked a while longer, about the first time Daniel and I met at a college mixer where the pizza ran out too soon, about the weekend Caleb and Riley adopted a rescue dog who chewed through 2 leashes and still slept with his head on Caleb's foot, about the way the cornfields look at dusk when the sky decides to brag. We talked until the silence between sentences felt like a blanket, until the roar of downstairs music thinned to a thread. We told each other what we needed to feel human again, kindness, agency, something that didn't smell like theater. When we finally crossed the room together, it wasn't a dare and it wasn't a spectacle. It was 2 people stepping out of a broken script at the same time, choosing a door marked ours instead of theirs. I will not describe the details. They aren't the point and they don't belong to anyone else. I will say only this. Nothing about it felt like stealing. It felt like setting down what had been stolen from us. Dignity, symmetry, a say. When the lamp clicked off, I stared at the dark and felt my pulse slow into a rhythm that belonged to me again. The dress lay across a chair like a retired costume. Somewhere in the building, applause rose for a song I no longer knew. Caleb's breathing evened. The world did not collapse. It simply rearranged around a new fact. I was not going to carry someone else's betrayal into my next room. Near midnight, rain began, soft, Midwestern, the kind that makes parking lots look like mirrors. I thought about time, about the watch that had sent us to the cameras, about the hours people measure without ever asking whether they're being honest inside them. The hotel's ice machine clanked once and fell quiet. I slept, not deeply, but without flinching. At dawn, the light came gray and patient through the gap in the curtains. Caleb woke and sat on the bench again, elbows on his knees, looking like a man taking inventory after a storm. We didn't speak right away. Morning doesn't like commentary, it prefers truth. Thank you, he said finally. It was not a victory, thank you. It was gratitude for not being alone in the hardest hour. Thank you, I answered and meant the same. We made coffee with the little machine that always tastes like compromise and drank it anyway. He found a hotel laundry bag for my shoes, which had picked up confetti and a smear of frosting I hadn't noticed. I found a pen and wrote a sentence on a hotel notepad I tore in half so we each could carry it. We did not start the story, but we chose how to finish our chapter. I tucked my half into my clutch beside the lip balm, the safety pins, the envelope of printed courage I no longer needed. He slipped his into his wallet behind his insurance card. We smiled at how ordinary that looked, truth filed next to paperwork. I zipped the dress, pinned my hair, checked my face. He straightened his tie. We stepped into the hallway like 2 people walking out of a theater after the credits, not because the story was over, but because we had chosen to leave before the lights came on. The carpet smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning spray. I carried my heels in one hand, my clutch in the other. Caleb walked half a step behind me, not protectively, but in solidarity, the way soldiers walk in formation after a march. The elevator ride down was silent except for the ding at each floor. When the doors opened into the lobby, the world outside our quiet bubble rushed back. Voices, suitcases, a toddler crying for cereal, the hotel clerk handing out check-in forms. Life continuing, indifferent to our private catastrophe. That was strangely comforting. Pain feels smaller when it stands in line with everyone else's errands. We crossed to the side exit to avoid the ballroom. Through the glass doors I glimpsed a cluster of guests still lingering from the night before, shoes in hand, jackets slung, laughter too loud for the early hour. None of them saw me. None of them knew I was already gone. Outside, the air smelled of wet asphalt and lilac from a hedge planted by the hotel. Rain had washed the night clean. Caleb's truck waited in the parking lot, a sturdy Ford that looked like it had hauled hay bales long before it hauled wedding gifts. We sat inside for a moment before he turned the key. "You heading to your parents?" he asked. "Eventually," I said. "Not yet." He nodded, understanding without commentary. That was the thing about 2 people who had been betrayed in the same hour, You didn't need to translate. We drove through quiet streets where flags still hung from porches, where hardware stores hadn't opened yet, where church signs offered verses about truth, as though they knew who would need them most. The radio murmured country music about lost love and stubborn hearts. Neither of us touched the dial. I thought about the faces in the ballroom when I had spoken, my mother's eyes filling with tears she didn't let fall, my father's steady hand on her shoulder, Daniel's frozen smile cracking in front of 200 witnesses. I thought about the murmurs that would ripple through our small town, how people would phrase it. She found out on the wedding day. She left him then and there. Some would say it with pity, some with admiration, some with the fascination people reserve for a fire they didn't have to put out themselves. But I also thought about the little girl I had been, the one who once wrote her name in sidewalk chalk outside our farmhouse and drew a heart beside it. She had wanted a life where promises meant something. Yesterday I had given her that gift. Not the wedding, not the gown, not the bouquet tossed into the air, but the act of standing and telling the truth out loud. Caleb pulled into a diner lot on the edge of town. "Coffee?" he asked. I almost laughed. Yesterday I had been sipping champagne from Crystal. Today I was about to drink burnt diner brew from a chipped mug. It felt right. We went inside. The waitress greeted us with the same tired smile she gave every morning crowd. "2 coffees?" she asked. "Yes," we said together. She poured without ceremony. The first sip was bitter, and it steadied me more than all the champagne of the night before. Caleb unfolded his half of the note we had written and set it between us on the table like proof. We read it again, silently. We did not start the story, but we chose how to finish our chapter. The waitress came back with a plate of toast, on the house. She didn't know what we had endured. She didn't need to. Kindness doesn't ask for explanations. "Do you regret it?" Caleb asked suddenly, not looking at me, but at the steam rising from his cup. "No," I said. "I regret trusting the wrong man. I don't regret trusting myself when it counted." He nodded. "Same." We sat a long while, not in silence but in peace, the kind that comes after you've already spoken the hardest words and survived them. When we left, the sun had risen fully, washing the diner windows in gold. I hugged Caleb in the parking lot. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't desperate. It was the hug of comrades after a battle, both scarred, both standing. "I'll handle my side," he said. "And I'll handle mine," I answered. We parted there, him turning toward his truck, me walking down the block toward the bus stop where my mother would meet me. My dress rustled against the wet pavement, no longer a costume but a reminder. At the corner, I looked back once. Caleb raised his hand in a quiet salute. I raised mine. Then we went our separate ways, carrying the same truth in different directions. I knew whispers would follow. I knew the story would stretch and bend in retellings. But at the center, something solid remained. I had not hidden. I had not bowed. I had spoken. And that, more than any ring or vow, was the beginning of the life I wanted. The bus hissed to a stop, and there was my mother on the curb, holding 2 styrofoam cups of coffee, as though she had known exactly what I would need. She didn't ask questions right away. She just pressed the cup into my hand and let me lean against her shoulder for the ride back to the farmhouse. The fields rolled by, wet with last night's rain, rows of corn standing tall like quiet witnesses. When we pulled into the gravel drive, Dad was already on the porch. He didn't say, "I told you," or how could he? He simply wrapped me in an embrace, so solid that for a moment I forgot the dress between us. "You came home," he said. 3 words enough. Inside, the house smelled like bacon and cinnamon rolls. My aunts had filled the kitchen in my absence, cooking as though food could mend fissures. Neighbors dropped by with pies, with hugs, with the careful Midwestern kindness that speaks loudest in casseroles and paper plates. I let them. I needed to feel part of something unbroken. Later that afternoon, I went upstairs and laid the gown across my childhood bed. Without the music, without the crowd, it looked different, just fabric, thread, lace. It had no power over me anymore. I folded it into the garment bag, zipped it up, and slid it under the bed. Out of sight, out of a story. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Daniel's name lit the screen. I let it ring out. He texted, "Please talk to me. Please don't end it like this." Another followed. It was a mistake. "You're overreacting." I stared at the words, then deleted them one by one. Some doors don't deserve reopening. Instead, I opened Caleb's last message. We chose our ending. I typed back, and our beginning. Then I powered the phone off. Evening came with crickets outside, and my father's low whistle as he fixed the screen door. I sat on the porch steps, sipping sweet tea, watching the sun sink behind the barns. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was acting. I was just breathing. The whispers would spread, I knew. Some people would call me brave, others reckless. Some would pity me, others admire me. None of it mattered. What mattered was that I hadn't let someone else's betrayal dictate the shape of my life. I had spoken the truth, claimed my dignity, and walked into the night under my own power. I thought of that surveillance screen again, the moment time split in two. A watch had been lost, but it wasn't about the watch at all. It was about what you find when you dare to look. And I had found the one thing that mattered more than vows or lace or rings, myself. As the stars came out, I whispered the sentence I'd carried all along, the one that steadied me when everything else fell. I will not leave myself behind to be loved. The night answered with silence, steady and sure, like a vow I could finally trust. And that is how my wedding day ended. Not with a kiss or a dance, but with a truth strong enough to build a future on.